The slap echoed
Kenny,
through St. Stephen's
my
Basilica
son,
like a
look at
thunderclap. And in that single
We
moment,
cannot do
Kenny
this
Obiora
here.
destroyed everything he'd ever loved. His mother stood frozen, her weathered hand still outstretched in blessing, the faded white dress trembling against her frail body. 500 guests gasped in unified horror. Cameras flashed. Phones rose into the air like a forest of accusing fingers. And somewhere in that cathedral of marble and stained glass, a young man's humanity shattered into irreparable pieces. But this story doesn't begin with violence. It begins with silence. If you're already gripped by what happens next, smash that subscribe button right now, because this African tale will shake you to your core. Hit the notification bell so you never miss stories that matter. Let's continue. 3 days before the wedding, Mama Adaize sat on her wooden stool in the village of Umuakpa, shelling groundnuts under the shade of the ancient Udala tree. Her fingers moved with the practiced rhythm of 62 years, but her mind wandered to her son. Kana hadn't called in 4 months. The last time she'd heard his voice, he'd promised to visit for her birthday. He never came. "Mama Adaize!" Her neighbor Naoma rushed toward her, phone clutched in her sweating palm. "Have you seen this? Have you seen what your son is doing?" The phone screen glowed with an image that made Mama Adaize's heart stumble. A wedding invitation. Elegant gold lettering on cream paper. "Mr. Keen Obiora and Miss Tara Nwoke request the honor of your presence." "Saturday," Naoma whispered. "This Saturday, at St. Stephen's in Port Victoria." Mama Adaize's hand stilled. The groundnut shells fell silent. "He didn't tell me," she said softly, more to herself than to Naoma. "My only son is getting married, and he didn't tell me." That night, she barely slept. She stared at the ceiling of her small room, remembering how she'd sold her wedding gold to pay his school fees, remembering the nights she'd gone hungry so he could eat, remembering his father's funeral when 11-year-old Keen had clung to her wrapper and whispered, "I'll make you proud, Mama. I'll make you so proud." And he had. Oh, how he had. By 32, Keen Obiora was the golden child of African tech innovation. His company, Vision Core Systems, had contracts with governments across 3 continents. Forbes called him the new face of African excellence. His face smiled from magazine covers and billboard advertisements throughout Port Victoria. But somewhere between the boardrooms and the billion naira deals, he'd forgotten the woman who'd given him everything. Saturday morning arrived with cruel brightness. Mama Adaize rose before dawn and bathed with the special black soap she saved for important occasions. She pulled out the white lace dress she'd worn to her own wedding 40 years ago. It was yellowed now, the fabric thin in places, but it was all she had that seemed appropriate for a son's wedding. She plaited her gray hair carefully, her fingers trembling slightly as she worked. "You're really going?" Naoma asked, as Mama Adaize emerged from her house at 6 in the morning. "Without an invitation?" "A mother needs no invitation to bless her child," Mama Adaize replied quietly. She carried only a small purse and a Bible her late husband had given her. "I won't cause trouble. I'll just stand at the back and pray for him. That's all." The bus to Port Victoria took 4 hours. Mama Adaize sat by the window, watching the landscape transform from red earth and scattered villages to concrete towers and traffic. The city had grown so much since her last visit. She barely recognized it anymore. St. Stephen's Basilica rose from the heart of Victoria Island like a monument to wealth and power. Its twin spires pierced the cloudless sky, and luxury cars lined the streets for 3 blocks in every direction. Mama Adaize stepped off the bus, suddenly aware of how shabby her white dress looked, how worn her shoes were, how completely she didn't belong in this world her son now inhabited. Security personnel in crisp black suits flanked the cathedral entrance. Red carpet unfurled down the marble steps. A massive banner proclaimed, "The Obiora Nwoke Wedding," in gold letters that shimmered in the midday sun. Mama Adaize approached the first security guard, a young man with an earpiece and an expression of professional indifference. "Good afternoon, my son. I'm here for the wedding." His eyes scanned her from head to toe, lingering on her faded dress and scuffed shoes. "Invitation? I don't have one. But I'm the groom's mother." The guard's face remained impassive. "Ma, I have strict instructions. No invitation, no entry. Please step aside." "But you don't understand. I'm Kene's mother. I gave birth to him. I raised him. Security," the guard called out sharply. 2 more men materialized beside her. "Please escort this woman away from the entrance. She's blocking guests." Humiliation burned through Mama Adaize's chest. Arriving guests in designer attire stared as they passed. She heard whispers, saw pointed fingers, caught fragments of conversation. "Who is that woman?" "Probably trying to beg for money." These people have no shame. A hand touched her elbow gently. She turned to see an elderly priest in white vestments, his kind face creased with concern. "Are you all right, my daughter?" "I'm the groom's mother," she whispered, and her voice cracked on the words. "I just wanted to bless my son." The priest's eyes widened in recognition, then clouded with something that looked like pity. "Wait here," he said softly. "Let me see what I can do." But before he could move, a black Range Rover pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and a woman emerged who could only be the bride. Tara Nwoke was stunning in the way that money makes possible. Flawless makeup, designer dress, diamonds that caught the light with every movement. Behind her came her father, Chief Nwankwo, a man whose wealth was legendary even in Port Victoria's elite circles. "Who is causing a disturbance at my daughter's wedding?" Chief Nwankwo's voice boomed across the entrance. The security guard pointed at Mama Adais. "This woman claims to be the groom's mother, but she has no invitation, and she's not on the guest list." Tara's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. "Kine's mother." She looked Mama Adais up and down with an expression that made the older woman feel like something stuck to the bottom of an expensive shoe. "Kine told me his mother was dead." The words hit Mama Adais like a physical blow. Her son had erased her, killed her off in conversation, removed her from his narrative, pretended she didn't exist. "I'm very much alive," Mama Adais managed to say, though her voice shook. "I'm Adais Obiora. I gave birth to Kane 32 years ago in Umwakpa General Hospital. His father's name was Chidi. He died when Kane was 11. I raised him alone. I sold everything I had so he could go to university. And now," her voice broke, "now I just want to see him happy." Something flickered across Tara's face, too quick to read. But Chief Nwankwo stepped forward, his expression hard. "Young woman, I don't know what your game is, but this wedding represents the union of two prestigious families. If you truly are who you claim to be, then you should understand that your presence here would be inappropriate. For everyone's sake, including your son's, I suggest you leave quietly." "But I'm his mother," Mama Adais repeated, and hated how small her voice sounded. "Then be a good mother, and don't embarrass him," Chief Nwankwo said coldly. He took Tara's arm and guided her toward the entrance, leaving Mama Adais standing there with tears streaming down her weathered face. The priest returned, his expression apologetic. "I spoke to the wedding coordinator. I'm sorry, but without the groom's explicit permission, I cannot override the guest list. But," he added gently, "there's a side entrance. If you wait by the garden chapel door, perhaps you can slip in once the ceremony begins. Stand at the very back. Say your prayers for your son, then leave before anyone notices." It wasn't what she'd hoped for, but it was something. Mama Adais nodded gratefully and made her way around the cathedral's perimeter to the small garden chapel door the priest had mentioned. She waited there in the shade of a frangipani tree, watching luxury cars arrive in an endless procession, watching Port Victoria's elite parade past in their finest clothes, watching a world she no longer recognized celebrate her son's happiness without her. This is where the story takes a turn you won't see coming. If you're feeling the weight of this mother's pain, drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. And don't forget to like this video. It helps us bring you more powerful African tales. Now, watch what happens next. Inside St. Stephen's Basilica, Kane Obiora stood at the altar in a custom-tailored tuxedo that cost more than his mother's entire house. He was handsome in the way that success makes men handsome. Confident posture, expensive grooming, the glow of someone who'd conquered the world before turning 35. Beside him stood his best man, Chukwudi, his friend since university. "You good?" Chukwudi whispered as organ music swelled through the cathedral. "Perfect," Keen replied, though his palms were sweating. Not from nervousness about marriage, he'd made his peace with that, but from a nagging anxiety he couldn't quite name. All morning, he'd felt like he'd forgotten something important. He'd checked his phone 17 times, reviewed the ceremony schedule twice, confirmed with the caterers and the DJ. Everything was perfect. So why did he feel like something was terribly wrong? The congregation rose as Tara appeared at the cathedral entrance, a vision in white silk and French lace. The train of her dress extended 15 feet behind her, carried by 4 flower girls. Photographers jostled for position. Camera flashes created a constellation of light. Keen's breath caught. This was it. This was the moment that would seal his place in Port Victoria's elite. The Nwoke family's approval had opened doors he'd never imagined possible. With Chief Nwankwo as his father-in-law, Vision Core systems would expand into markets that had been previously inaccessible. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a coronation. Tara reached the altar and her father placed her hand in Keen's with a look that said clearly, "Don't mess this up." The Archbishop began the ceremony with prayers that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." That's when Mama Ades slipped through the garden chapel door. She moved as quietly as she could, staying close to the back wall, trying to be invisible. But in a cathedral filled with designer clothes and jewelry, a woman in a faded white dress stood out like a wound. Heads began to turn. Whispers rippled through the pews. "Who is that? How did she get in? Security should remove her." Keen didn't notice at first. He was focused on Tara, on the Archbishop's words, on maintaining the perfect image. But then Chukwudi elbowed him sharply and nodded toward the back of the church. Kene turned. His eyes found his mother standing there, tears streaming down her face, her hands clasped over her heart in prayer. And in that moment, every carefully constructed wall he'd built around his past crumbled. Panic seized him. Not joy at seeing his mother. Not love or relief or even surprise. Just pure, acidic panic. She wasn't supposed to be here. Nobody from his old life was supposed to be here. He'd worked so hard to bury that past, to recreate himself as someone worthy of this world. Someone who belonged in cathedrals and boardrooms instead of village markets and dusty compounds. "Kane?" Tara whispered beside him. "Who is that woman?" The Archbishop had stopped speaking. 500 guests had turned to stare. Camera swung toward the back of the church, and Mama Ades, thinking her son was looking at her with recognition, began walking down the center aisle with her arms outstretched. "My son," she called out softly, her voice breaking with emotion. "I came to bless you. I came to pray for your happiness." "Security!" Keene's voice cracked through the cathedral like a whip. "Get her out of here!" But Mama Ades kept walking, kept coming, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Ken, it's me. It's your mama. I know I wasn't invited, but I couldn't let you marry without my blessing. Everything I am, everything I have, I put into raising you. Let me just—" "I said get out!" Ken roared, and the sound of his voice silenced even the whispers. He stepped away from the altar, away from Tara, his face twisted with something ugly and desperate. "I don't know who you are, but you need to leave. Now." Mama Ades stopped walking. The pain in her eyes was so raw that several guests looked away, unable to bear it. "Ken, don't you recognize me? I'm your mother. I carried you for 9 months. My mother is dead," Ken shouted, and the lie hung in the air like poison. "She died 5 years ago. You're just some crazy woman trying to ruin my wedding for attention, or money, or God knows what. Security, I will have your jobs if you don't remove her immediately." But Mama Ades had reached him now. She stood 3 feet away, her weathered face etched with devastation. "Why are you saying these things?" she whispered. "Did I do something wrong? Did I embarrass you? I just wanted to see you happy. I just wanted to—" And that's when it happened. Keen's hand rose and fell with terrible speed, connecting with his mother's face in a slap that echoed through St. Stephen's Basilica like the crack of doom itself. Mama Ades stumbled backward, her hand flying to her cheek. The old Bible she'd been carrying fell from her purse and hit the marble floor with a sound like breaking bone. The silence that followed was absolute. Not a breath. Not a whisper. Not a single movement anywhere in that vast cathedral. Even the sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows seemed to dim, as if God himself had turned away in horror. Then all hell broke loose. Phones erupted everywhere. Dozens of guests were already streaming the wedding live on social media. The slap, captured from multiple angles, would be trending on Twitter within 90 seconds. Chief Nwankwo lunged toward the altar, his face purple with rage. Tara stood frozen, one hand over her mouth, her perfect makeup running with shocked tears. Right here, in this moment of complete devastation, I need you to pause and drop a like on this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear this story. And comment below, what would you have done in Mama Adaizi's place? Because what happens next will break your heart even more. "You struck her," the Archbishop breathed, and there was horror in his voice. "You struck your own mother in the house of God." But Kane wasn't listening. He was staring at his hand, as if it belonged to someone else, as if he couldn't quite believe what he'd just done. Around him, the wedding disintegrated into chaos. Guests were already leaving, unable to associate themselves with what they'd witnessed. The live stream had been viewed 40,000 times in 2 minutes. Comments flooded in. Disgrace. Monster. Inhuman. Cursed. Mama Adais bent slowly and picked up her fallen Bible. Her cheek bore the red imprint of her son's hand. She looked at Kane with eyes that held no anger, only a grief so profound, it seemed to age her 10 years in 10 seconds. "I forgive you," she whispered, though her voice shook. A mother's love doesn't die because her son's humanity does. Then she turned and walked out of St. Stephen's Basilica, with her head high, her faded white dress floating behind her like a ghost. Tara removed her engagement ring and placed it on the altar. "We're done," she said flatly. "The wedding is over. The engagement is over. Everything is over. My father warned me you were hiding something about your past. I should have listened." Chief Nwankwo's voice boomed through the cathedral. "By morning, every business partner you have will know what kind of man you really are. You're finished in this city, boy. Finished." Within an hour, the video had 2 million views. Within 3 hours, it was on national news. By evening, Kene Obiora was the most hated man in Nigeria. Vision Corps Systems stock plummeted. Board members called emergency meetings. Investors withdrew funding. The government contracts were suspended pending ethical review. Partners deleted Kene's number from their phones. The Forbes profile was pulled from the website. Even his own employees refused to look him in the eye. Kene sat alone in his penthouse apartment that night, watching his life disintegrate in real time on his phone screen. The video played on loop across every social media platform. Celebrity influencers shared it with captions of disgust. Religious leaders used it as sermon material. Child psychologists analyzed it on morning talk shows. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had condemnation. But what haunted Kene wasn't the public outrage. It was the look in his mother's eyes just before she'd walked away. That expression of profound disappointment, mixed with inexplicable forgiveness. How could she forgive him? He didn't deserve forgiveness. He deserved everything that was happening to him and worse. He tried calling her. Her phone was switched off. He sent text messages that went undelivered. He called neighbors in Umuokpa, but they hung up the moment. They heard his voice. He'd become untouchable, radioactive with shame. 3 days later, when the initial storm of publicity had died to a steady rain of contempt, Kene drove to Umuokpa. He needed to see her. He needed to explain, though he had no explanation that made sense even to himself. He'd acted on instinct, on panic, on the desperate fear that his carefully constructed new identity would crumble if anyone saw where he'd really come from. But when he reached his mother's small house, the door was open. The windows were open. The house was empty. Her few possessions remained, neatly organized. Her clothes still hung in the small wardrobe. Her cooking pots sat clean and dry on the shelf. But Mama Adaze herself was gone. On the wooden table in the center of the main room, Kene found a letter, written in his mother's careful handwriting on the back of an old church bulletin. "My dear Kane, I am leaving so that my presence will not continue to be a burden to you. A mother's love should lift her child up, not weigh him down with shame. I forgave you the moment your hand touched my face, just as I would forgive you anything, because that is what mothers do. But forgiveness doesn't mean I will stay where I am not wanted. I gave you life. I gave you everything I had. And now I give you one last gift. My absence. May it bring you the peace my presence apparently destroyed. Know that I will pray for you every day until I die. Know that I am proud of what you achieved, even if you are not proud of where you came from. Know that a mother's blessing doesn't need an invitation, and it doesn't end just because her son wishes she would disappear. You got your wish, my son. I have disappeared. But I take my love for you with me, whole and unbroken, because nothing you do can kill it. Your mama." The letter fell from Kane's trembling hands. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." He tore through Umuokpa, asking everyone where she'd gone. But Mama Adaze had vanished, like morning mist. Some said they'd seen her board a bus heading north. Others claimed she'd gone to stay with a distant relative in another state. The priest from her church said she'd come to say goodbye, but wouldn't tell him where she was going. She said she needed to make sure her son could live his life without embarrassment, the priest told Kane with barely concealed disgust. She sacrificed her own dignity for yours. Then she sacrificed her own home. What more will you take from that woman before you're satisfied? Kane spent the next 3 months searching. He hired private investigators. He posted on social media platforms, swallowing his pride to ask for help from the same people who'd condemned him. He visited hospitals, churches, markets, anywhere his mother might have gone. But Mama Adaze had disappeared completely, as if the earth had swallowed her whole. I have to pause here because what I'm about to tell you next will change everything. You think you know about this story? Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and buckle up for a twist that will leave you speechless. 4 months after the wedding that never was, Kane received a phone call from Father Boniface, the priest who'd tried to help his mother at the cathedral entrance. Mr. Obiora, the priest's voice was heavy with sorrow. I have news about your mother. Keen's heart stopped. You found her. Where is she? Is she all right? Please come to St. Mary's Mission Clinic in Enugu. Come quickly. The drive to Enugu took 6 hours. Keen pushed his car to dangerous speeds, praying to a God he'd stopped believing in years ago. Let her be alive. Let me apologize. Let me make it right. He bargained with heaven, promising anything, everything, if he could just see his mother one more time. St. Mary's Mission Clinic was a small facility run by nuns in one of Enugu's poorest neighborhoods. Father Boniface met Kenny at the entrance, his face drawn with fatigue and grief. She's in room 7, the priest said quietly. But Mr. Obiora, you need to prepare yourself. She's very weak. Keen ran down the hallway, his expensive shoes slapping against the worn linoleum. He burst into room 7 and stopped dead. Mama Adais lay in a narrow bed, her body so frail she barely made a shape under the thin blanket. Her hair had gone completely white. Her face was hollow, her breathing shallow and labored. Medical equipment beeped steadily beside her. Mama! Keeney choked out, rushing to her bedside. Mama, I'm here! I'm so sorry! I'm so sorry! Her eyes opened slowly. For a moment they were cloudy and unfocused. Then recognition dawned, and something like peace settled over her weathered features. Keena, she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. My son. What happened? Why didn't you tell me you were sick? Why did you disappear? A sad smile touched her lips. I've been sick for 2 years, my son. Cancer. I didn't tell you because you were building your empire, and I didn't want to be the weight that pulled you down. After the wedding, I knew I needed to spare you the burden of watching me die. A mother protects her child, even from herself. The revelation hit Kine like a sledgehammer. While he'd been obsessing over business deals and social status, his mother had been dying. While he'd been constructing his new identity, she'd been fighting for her life alone. While he'd been too embarrassed to invite her to his wedding, she'd been using her last strength to come and bless him anyway. No, Keen sobbed, gripping her hand. No, you can't die. Not like this. Not with me being such a monster to you. Please, Mama. Please forgive me. I already forgave you, she whispered, and her hand, light as paper, touched his cheek where he'd struck her 4 months ago. The moment it happened, I forgave you. That's what love does. But I don't deserve it. I struck you. I denied you. I erased you from my life like you never existed. I'm the worst son in the world. You're human, Mama Adais said gently. Flawed and frightened and desperate to belong somewhere. I understand that. I just wish you'd understood that you already belonged. You always belonged. You were always enough, just as you were. Tears streamed down Keen's face, years of suppressed emotion finally breaking through. I was so afraid they'd see where I came from and reject me. I thought I had to hide you to keep their respect. And now? Now I've lost everything that mattered. The wedding, the business, the reputation, all of it. And the only thing I want back is the one thing I destroyed. You. I just want you, Mama. Mama Adaise's breathing had become more labored. A nun entered quietly and checked the monitors, her face grave. Father Boniface appeared in the doorway. She doesn't have much time, the nun whispered to Keen. Her body is shutting down. She's been holding on, waiting for something. Now I think I understand what she was waiting for. Keen clutched his mother's hand tighter. Don't leave me. Please don't leave me. I need more time. I need to make it right. You can't make it right, my son, Mama Adaisi said softly. Some things can't be fixed, only forgiven. Some bridges can't be rebuilt, only blessed before they crumble completely. I forgive you. That's my gift to you. Take it and live. Take it and be better. Take it and remember that your worth doesn't come from what others think of you, but from who you choose to be when nobody's watching. I love you, Kaine sobbed. I should have said it more. I should have shown it better. I love you so much, Mama. I know, my son. I've always known. A mother knows these things. Her eyes drifted closed. The beeping of the monitor slowed. Father Boniface began praying softly. The nun stepped forward to adjust the IV line, but there was nothing more to be done. At 4:37 p.m. on a Tuesday in September, Mama Adaeze took her last breath. She died with her son's hand in hers, with forgiveness on her lips, with love in her heart despite everything. And Kine Obiora, who'd lost his humanity at a wedding 4 months earlier, found it again in a mission clinic room as he cradled his mother's body and wept for everything he'd destroyed in his desperate quest to belong to a world that had never truly wanted him anyway. The funeral was small, just a handful of villagers from Umuokpa, Father Boniface, the nuns from St. Mary's, and Ken. No media, no cameras, no social media influencers offering hollow condolences for clicks, just honest grief and the heavy smell of red earth as they lowered Mama Adai's into the ground beside her husband. Ken placed her faded white wedding dress on the coffin before they covered it with soil. The same dress she'd worn to bless him at a wedding where he'd cursed her instead. But here's where the story takes its final, unexpected turn. 3 weeks after the funeral, Ken returned to Umuokpa to collect his mother's belongings. As he sorted through her few possessions, he found a metal box hidden beneath her bed. Inside were letters, dozens of them, hundreds of them. Letters she'd written to him over the years, but never sent. Ken opened them with shaking hands and began to read. Letter after letter, his mother had poured out her heart. She wrote about her pride in his achievements. She wrote about her cancer diagnosis and her fear of burdening him. She wrote about watching him on television and feeling such joy that her heart could barely contain it. She wrote about her loneliness and her unshakable love and her constant prayers for his happiness. But here's what broke Ken completely. In the last letter, dated 2 days before his wedding, she'd written about her decision to attend, despite not being invited. I know he will be embarrassed by me. I know I don't fit into his new world. But I also know that a mother's blessing has power, even when it's unwanted. I will go. I will bless him from a distance if I must. And if he rejects me completely, I will still consider it a privilege to have raised such an extraordinary son. My love for him doesn't require his love in return. That's what makes it love. Ken sat on his mother's floor and read until the sun set and rose again. And somewhere in those hours of reading her unspoken love, he found his purpose. 6 months later, Kene Obiora liquidated what remained of his assets and established the Adai's Foundation. Not a flashy organization designed to rehabilitate his public image, but a genuine operation focused on supporting elderly women who'd been abandoned by their children. He built homes for them. He paid for their medical care. He sat with them and listened to their stories. He became the son to hundreds of forgotten mothers that he'd failed to be for his own. Before I give you the final piece of this story, I need you to do something. Like this video right now. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And comment below with the name of someone who sacrificed everything for you. Honor them in the comments section. They deserve to be remembered. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. The truth that changed everything Kene thought he knew about his mother's final months. 1 year after Mama Adai's death, Father Boniface came to visit Kene at the Adai's Foundation headquarters. The old priest looked troubled, carrying a worn envelope. "There's something you need to know about your mother," Father Boniface said heavily. "Something she made me promise not to tell you until a year had passed." He handed Ken the envelope. Inside was a medical report from St. Mary's Mission Clinic, dated 3 months before the wedding. Ken's hands trembled as he read, then read again, then looked up at the priest with incomprehension. This says her cancer was in remission. This says she was responding to treatment. This says she could have lived years longer." Father Boniface nodded sadly. "After what happened at the wedding, your mother stopped taking her medication. She stopped going to her treatments. She told the sisters at the clinic that she was ready to go home to God, that her work here was finished." "No," Ken breathed. "No, that's not possible. You're saying she chose to die?" "I'm saying she was already dying, but she could have had more time. Instead, she decided that her final act of love would be to free you from the burden of her illness. She believed you would never move forward with her alive, that you would be trapped by guilt and obligation. So she released you the only way she knew how." The truth crashed over Ken like a tidal wave. His mother hadn't just forgiven him. She'd given her remaining life as a final gift, believing that only her death could truly free him from the weight of what he'd done. "That's insane," Ken choked out. "That's the most insane, beautiful, horrible thing I've ever heard." "That's love," Father Boniface corrected gently. "That's what love looks like when it has nowhere else to go. She loved you so much that she was willing to die sooner than watch you destroy yourself with guilt. She loved you so much that her last act was to give you permission to live." Ken sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he spoke, his voice raw with emotion. "Then I'll make sure it wasn't wasted. Every day I have left, I'll make sure her sacrifice meant something." And he did. The Adai's Foundation grew, not into a corporate giant, but into something more valuable, a genuine force for healing. Keane personally visited every woman the Foundation served. He learned their names, their stories, their favorite foods. He showed up for birthdays and holidays. He became the son they'd lost. And in doing so, he slowly became human again. 5 years after his mother's death, Keane stood in front of a gathering at the Foundation's main facility. 200 elderly women sat before him, women who'd been abandoned or forgotten by their families, women his mother's love had taught him to see. "My name is Keane Obiora," he began, his voice steady now. "And I am the man who slapped his mother at his own wedding. I am the man who denied the woman who gave him everything. I am the man who destroyed his own humanity in front of 500 witnesses and 2 million online viewers." The room was silent. Some of the women knew his story. Others were hearing it for the first time. "I can never undo what I did," Keane continued. "I can never apologize enough. I can never be forgiven enough, though my mother forgave me with her last breath. But I can do this. I can make sure that no mother in our community dies alone and forgotten. I can make sure that the love you gave your children, even if they rejected it, is honored and celebrated here. I can be the son to you that I failed to be for my own mother." An elderly woman in the front row raised her hand. "But why?" she asked. "Why do you do this if you can never make it right?" Keane smiled, and for the first time in 5 years, it reached his eyes. "Because my mother taught me that love doesn't require repayment. It doesn't demand reciprocation. It simply gives and keeps giving, even when there's nothing left to give but your last breath. I'm not doing this to earn forgiveness. I'm doing this because she loved me enough to show me what love actually looks like. And the only way to honor that is to pass it forward." The woman nodded slowly. Then she stood and walked to Keane. She took his face in her weathered hands and blessed him in Igbo, the same blessing his mother had tried to give him at the wedding. Other women joined her. They surrounded him, these forgotten mothers, and they blessed him in a dozen different languages, offering the grace their own children had denied them. And Keane Obiora, who had lost his humanity at a wedding 5 years earlier, wept as it was slowly, painfully, beautifully restored by the love of mothers who had every reason to withhold it, but chose to give it anyway. Because that's what love does. It forgives, it sacrifices, it endures, it transforms. Even when it has every reason to give up, it chooses instead to give more. This is the end of Keane's story, but maybe it's the beginning of yours. If this tale touched something in you, if it made you think about someone you've taken for granted, if it reminded you that love is the only currency that truly matters, then do 3 things right now. First, subscribe to this channel so you never miss stories that change how you see the world. Second, like this video and share it with everyone you know. Some stories are too important to keep to yourself. And third, most importantly, call your mother. Text her. Visit her. Tell her you love her. Do it today, not tomorrow, because tomorrow isn't promised to any of us. Drop a comment telling us what lesson you're taking from this story. And remember, the people who love you don't need your success. They just need your presence. Don't learn that lesson the way Keane did. Until the next tale, remember that humanity isn't measured by what you achieve, but by how you treat the people who helped you get there. This has been an African drama that will stay with you long after the video ends. God bless you, and may you never take your mother's love for granted.